Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'm Gail Brewer, Manhattan Borough President, and for those of you who haven't been here before, thank you very much for joining us. I'm honored to have these prominent guests here today. I think you know we're here to talk about police-community relations. And last year, after the tragic death of Eric Garner and the ensuing street protests, Norman Siegel approached us about addressing the growing unrest through a series of community dialogues. I knew we wanted to work with Norman Siegel as he has played such a prominent role in this issue today, as we will discuss, as well as so many other key issues in New York City. He has provided us a moral conscience, a street fighter he is, from Brooklyn, and a solid legal mind for so many years. I had to say that. I am honored that he approached us, both me and the wonderful colleague, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, for this very important work of examining police-community relations and how they can be repaired. So to kick it off, here is my good friend and prominent civil rights attorney, the very special Norman Siegel.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful, overstated introduction. Usually, and I don't get that from the political world, but the two people to my left and right are not typical of the political world, and that's why I proudly stand with them today. The deaths of Eric Garner in Staten Island and Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, in the summer of 2014, and the resulting non-indictments of the police officers involved in their deaths brought on a national outcry and a round of intensifying mass protests throughout the autumn of 2014. The growing outcry in the streets and in the national and local media, and strong, often conflicted feelings they had brought out on the questions of race and justice, caused me to realize that we were once more in that, quote, historic moment when our nation's racial history emerges from the shadows to confront our perceptions and our conscience. In hope of using that moment to learn all we could about the history and the current state of policing and race relations in our city, I reached out to Borough President Eric Adams and Borough President Gail Brewer to initiate a series of town hall meetings on how to improve police-community relations. The testimony of over 1,000 New Yorkers at our 7 town halls and high school dialogues revealed a legacy of individual and cultural harm caused by racial animus in the NYPD's policing of racial minority communities. As the report shows, that harm is deep and possibly permanent. But we found that it is accompanied by an openness to work with the department to repair the relationship and to create a new collaborative framework in which racial minority communities will be policed effectively, respectfully, and without bias. One of the most important realizations from the town halls, and a key to the signal to the department if they're listening, is that the residents of Brooklyn and Manhattan want genuine community-based policing. But unless the NYPD's latest reforms ensure that, quote, neighborhood policing strategy is collaborative, the community and the NYPD, in my opinion, are going to spend another generation as strangers, accompanied by fear and hostility. We also learned that, quote, neighborhood policing, as proposed by Commissioner Bill Bratton, will not succeed in improving police-community relations in minority neighborhoods, nor keep the crime rates low unless it is developed, and this is key, developed and deployed by working closely with the residents of those communities. The people, thank you. It's always better to have applause than boos, so thank you, and I've had plenty of that. The people in the communities that we visited expect to have a strong, respected, permanent role in designing how their community is policed. The community is prepared to believe that most of the NYPD rank and file is much better much better than the profiling of recent years might suggest, and that while wrongs were done, and they were, to genuine animus, most of the participants in our meetings were committed under the aegis of a police culture that licensed racial stereotyping and the abuse of lawful authority. And the community is waiting to see if their belief in the fairness and professionalism of the department and its officers is justified. The report makes 37 specific recommendations, and I'm going to just go over what I consider to be the top 10. Not David Letterman, but a top 10. First, and probably most important, and I'll spend a little extra time here, because this issue really is so troubling from my perspective. We want to ensure, don't want to knock out my WCBS 880, of course. We want to ensure that the language in the NYPD patrol guide and training material that guides officers on how to conform to the law while conducting a stop and frisk based on reasonable suspicion follows the standard established by the U.S. Supreme Court in the seminal case in 1969, Terry versus Ohio. This one's so frustrating. As a civil libertarian, people are shocked when I say stop and frisk is a valid law enforcement tool. It was abused for many years in the city of New York. If you take a look at the appendix, there's correspondence between myself and Ira Glasser, who was the former head of the American Civil Liberties Union, in 2012. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with Mayor Bloomberg and Ray Kelly. We were informed by people in the academy that they were teaching people at the academy incorrect standards for Terry versus Ohio. On page 86 of the document, there's a footnote. And the point I want to spend a little time here. When we were almost at 700,000 in 2011 of stops and frisks, we knew that that was an abuse of authority, because the standard that the Supreme Court set in Terry versus Ohio was not being complied with, and people were being trained illegally with regard to how to conduct stop and frisk. The fact that this year it's projected to be 45,000, I'm not sure that's the correct standard either. You can't let politics come in when you're trying to enforce the law. Just as it was suspicious and proven to be unconstitutional when it was 685,000, how do we know that the 45,000 is even accurate? Are the police holding back now because of the politics around stop and frisk, which is not what should happen? And when that happens, that's why many of us in the civil rights community and others are suspicious of government, because Terry versus Ohio sets forth what the standard should be. And the standard for a stop is different than a standard for a frisk. And you can't just have a hunch. You have to have reasonable suspicion. You have to have specific, articulable reasons for why someone, A, should be stopped, and then further, why someone should be frisked. For example, you can't just say they're in the crime high area, or they're African American and they're 22 years old and they're wearing jeans, etc. What you need is a bulge in your pocket. And if the bulge is not there, there's no grounds constitutionally for frisking someone. My point is, and if there's one point I want to make, this standard should be applied, and whatever the results are, whether it's 100,000, 300,000, or 12, if you meet the standard under the law, then the police should be able to, A, stop someone and should frisk it. We shouldn't let politics, liberal or conservative, enter into the enforcement of the law. And that's what got this city in trouble. And it took the federal court, a couple of feet from here, to then say it's unconstitutional. But the fact that it's so low now is raises concern. So that is one of the most important things for the future, that the training and the application of stop and frisk be adhered to. And when you see in the report with regard to the comments that people made at the town hall meetings, very often this was the issue that really angered people. We want to abolish or reform the current grand jury system. Very important. Eric Gardner. The reason why people are so upset about Eric Gardner is we see that videotape, and maybe there is valid reasons for why the grand jury did not indict those officers. And I use plural, not just one. But if you don't have the transcript, if you don't hear or listen or read what actually took place in that grand jury, no wonder people were cynical. No wonder people go to the streets, because it appears that injustice was being done. It's not fair to the cop either. If the cop testified and there's a reason we should hear why the particular officer did the particular acts, we should hear it. The grand jury is manipulated by the district attorneys, and it's outdated. In my opinion, it should be abolished, but we also have some suggestions of how to reform it. We need to increase the police academy training from 6 months to 1 year. It took me and other lawyers 3 years to get a degree to become a lawyer. How can the cops learn Terry versus Ohio and other legal aspects of their job in 5 or 6 months? We need to create a mayoral task force to review the NYPD training material and procedures every 3 years. When Giuliani, he would say it was a mistake, he put me on a task force in '97 to look at the Loima situation in police community relations. When we went to the academy and we looked at the training material reinforced stereotyping based on how they describe people in the communities. We have to look at the training material because that's what the cops are learning. We have to modify training to enhance skills in the de-escalation of conflict. We have to offer incentives so that officers can live in the communities they police or in the city. We recommend a residency requirement. If not, we recommend various kinds of incentives for people to be able to have tax deductions for living in the city or even assistance on mortgage payments. Many of the people at the town hall meeting said they want the cops to be in the community so that they reflect who lives in that community, not people who come from outside, not only the community, but outside the city, who don't have the same understanding, culture, even the language, so that they can relate to people in the community. We want to reform one other part, which was really, it came from Brooklyn, and it shows how balanced we were trying to do. We want to entitle police officers to sabbaticals due to the high stress that police work adds to the general stresses of work and family. Just think of it. Police officer comes in, they're giving the psych test. 7, 8 years later, after dealing a very stressful job, nobody really deals with their psychological condition. There could be walking time bombs out there. And we need to be able to set up a system that periodically people come in and don't see it as a negative in order to deal with psychological situations. Sabbaticals. What happened in Brooklyn on our first meeting, I got up and said, I'm a former teacher, and every 8 years the teachers were able to have a sabbatical. Why can't we have the cops do that? We thought it was a great idea. We've tweaked it a little by saying that if a police officer after 8 years for 6 months wants to take a sabbatical, give them 50% of their pay. If they work in the community and work in a not-for-profit social service agency in the community, up it to 2/3. And by then, maybe the person sees the community from a different perspective, doesn't see everyone as possible perps, but gets to understand who the people are in the community, and that's what community policing could be about. The body cameras, it's incredible that the body cameras are being seen as the panacea, and yet there's no protocols in place. You'll be shocked that the police department is taking the position that even though they'll have the body cameras, we, the public, will not be able to see it. Or if we have to, as New York One learned, if you ask for it under a FOIL, Freedom of Information, they'll charge you thousands of dollars in order to get it. Don't fall for that. If the police are the only people who have the video, they will control and manipulate, in my opinion, what the debate is as soon as that action occurs. So we need the proper protocols. We want to create and improve police-community relations coalition in the city. We need all of you who came to the town hall meetings to continue to put the public spotlight on the issue of police-community relations. If we don't do that, the report's just going to be filed away. So we need all of you to continue this kind of situation. And what we're talking about to keep the spotlight, just as the mayor and other officials do an annual report, we want the police commissioner to do an annual police community relations status report to the city council every year. And we want the 5 borough presidents during the same week in the same year, each year, to hold a town hall meeting in each of the 5 boroughs consecutive, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, so that the spotlight continues to focus in on police community relations and the overlap of race. Let me conclude by saying the problems of police community relations continue to challenge New York and cities all across this country. This report will go not only to the governor, but the President of the United States. Among the most serious challenges are the tension and anger created in racial minority communities due to harsh policing practices and perceptions of racial animus. There is a legitimate fear of physical harm and perceived lack of support, and both groups, police and the community, believe that they're being stereotyped. We have to undo the stereotypes and bring people together. The consequences of this divide that I've just mentioned has been profound for officers and residents alike, and for communities where they work and reside. We have a lot of work to do. We need to create the coalition that I just mentioned to bring about the changes that are long overdue. Our report can help. Our report is not an end, but a beginning, and we call upon all New Yorkers to take its lessons to heart and act upon them. The one last thing on a personal level, look at the last page when the 3 of us wrote to the police commissioner and Patrick Lynch at the union, asking them if they would sit with us and talk to us about their perceptions before the report came out. Lynch never got back to us. Blown opportunity, in my opinion, but maybe that speaks volumes about the opposition to trying to bring people together around these issues. To Police Commissioner Bratton's credit, his attorney Edna Wells Handy got in touch with us. Our understanding is, and hopefully when the reporters call the police department later today, although I don't want to tell people what to do on their job, but if you do call, what we've been told, what will be said, and that'll be a test to see whether or not there's validity and conversations. We were told that the police commissioner will welcome the report and will invite the 3 of us to sit down to begin a discussion about the 37 recommendations. Hopefully that will happen. There's lots of people who've worked on this, Ryan, Stefan, Alicia, so many people from the different offices, but the one person that on the record, although he told me not to do it, and he'll be mad if I did it, I want to tell you that Cal Snyder was the person who put this report together for us, and he deserves all the credit in the world. Thank you very much.
This water, and put it over there if you don't want it. Anyway, I am honored to introduce the Borough President of Brooklyn, Eric Adams. It's a particular honor for me. We came into the Borough Presidency at the same time. He is a former state senator. Obviously, we all know he's also a former police officer and took leading roles in both positions. He is somebody who we have a great deal of time together as the 5 borough presidents. We have a lot of fun. We do a lot of policy together. We text often. And doing this report with him and obviously with Norman Siegel has been an honor. So without further ado, my friend, colleague, and your friend, Borough President Eric Adams.
Thank you so much, Gail. And really, I think that we're at a good place, and I think Norman covered so much of it. And I thank you, Norman, for really helping just really guide the conversation. And I want to say from the onset, I just have a few comments, 2 that I want to touch on that I think is important in the report. But one, this was not a I hate the police report or gathering. I believe that police officers would be amazed at how much appreciation was displayed during the hearings of understanding the challenges and difficulties of the job. As Norman indicated, even the thought of saying that officers should be allowed to take a sabbatical showed that people want good, healthy police interactions. And not to continue the dialogue between police and community is something that is a missed opportunity. And I'm going to personally reach out to Pat Lynch and tell him that it's not an option. We must sit down, because it is a good union leader that will evolve into 21st century policing must understand you must be proactive. You're not great if you get a good attorney for your clients or your membership after a shooting. You're great when you prevent a shooting, and that should be the focus of the 21st leadership in policing. The second thing is that, I am really attached to this topic. 22 years, I wore that bulletproof vest, and I protected the children and families of this city. And for 8 years, I was in public life. It's a 30-year accumulation from wearing the vest to standing on street corners, talking to people, talking about how do we get quality policing. And I think that we did something that is unique by allowing people to have a safe space to talk about the interaction with their police department. We do not have an option. We must get it right. We must get it right. The goal is not to be quick. The goal is to be correct. So putting out cameras without having true policies behind it is trying to be expedient. Putting together training without having real aspects of how it's going to be used is expediency. We don't want expediency. We want to lead the country on how we took our time, how we became thoughtful, and how we finally solved the problem that has a history of negative interactions between communities and the police department. We have to get it right. And that's what this report is about. It's about how do we hear from people on the ground, their concerns, and use that to come up with real mechanisms of allowing police to do their job in a very real way. We think that we're on the direction of doing that when you look at the list of recommendations. And so I want to just point out two of those, and I want to start from the onset. The three of us will have disagreements even in the reports. The goal was not to feel we have to agree. It was not to be disagreeable. Because all of us see what we want, and we want what we see. And if we don't allow ourselves to fit in the shoes of those who may be walking a different route, then we won't come to a full conclusion of how to solve this problem. I am a believer in broken window policing. I am a believer in using stop and frisk correctly. I believe those are great tools to do great public service. It's the abuse of those items that we have witnessed throughout the years that has really led to the schism between police and community. And so the two areas that I think are important is, one, we do not have a crime problem in the city. We have a public relation problem in the city. Our crime numbers are at historically low levels. There are pockets of crime that we must get into the crevices of the communities to find real on-the-ground solutions. But the overall problem we have in the city is that our public in those areas don't like the police, and truth be told, the police don't like them. The good people of these communities, our police population and our community populations, are not communicating with each other. Bad guys talk to each other all the time, so good guys must talk to each other all the time, and we're not doing that. So my call to the commissioner and the mayor is to change the responsibility of not the officer who's in a radio motor patrol responding to jobs throughout the day. Change the responsibility to that officer all of you see on the corner who stands there for 8 hours with no human interaction or engagement with the public. Have him become the individual that is not only in charge of public safety, but improving PR. Hand out a municipal ID card to someone who may be an undocumented. Talk to a parent who needs pre-K enrollment. Or how about doing something revolutionary and saying good morning and hello? And in return, ask a person about their children. I heard your son just graduated from school. Good luck to him. Build that relationship so people can start seeing the human of a police officer, and the police officer can see the human nature of the people that they are protecting. And on the same, our report pointed out, the public must understand that the police is there for public protection. And we too should engage in a conversation with that person who's standing on the corner. He too has a son or daughter. He too is worrying about how does he pay his mortgage? How does he able to live in a community that is displacing him as well? We are in this together, and that spirit and energy must come out of how do we become creative and finding ways to ensure that our community and police can interact. Second, which I think is the most important aspect, the second most important aspect. We have a minor league of policing in the city, of law enforcement. They are in the hospital police, the school safety officers, traffic enforcement, homeless police. Those officers are the minor league of policing. What's good about this body of people, they're 100% New Yorkers. And they are over 80% women and person of color. The only thing that prevents them from coming into the major leagues of the New York City Police Department is that they do not have 96 college credits. That makes no sense. You cannot say that a police officer is better to do this difficult job merely because he took 96 college credits and lived at home with his family all his life and never had a job. The best person to do this job is a person that we have watched for 2 to 5 years, have on-the-job experience, and then allow them to use that experience as college credit requirements and take the test to become the New York City Police Department. We do it for the military. So if it's all right to waive college credits for someone who's fighting the Taliban, then it's all right to have someone who's protecting our children as school safety agents. And we do it for the Department of Correction. Why are we preventing this great body of law enforcement officers who can diversify the department to come into the department merely because they do not have 96 college credits in any topic at all? That is wrong. And it is preventing us from having a qualitative body of law enforcement personnel that we have watched under stressful situations before we gave them a gun and shield. What we are doing now, if you have never had a job before and you went to school for 96 college credits, you are given a gun and shield and given a right that no other American has, even the president, to take life and to take liberty. We have to have a better standard before we turn over that right for someone to do that. And so when you go through the pages of this report, we should go through it with the open mind that we embrace public safety. We do not want to inhibit our police officers from ensuring that they can do their job. That's why the balance of this report is so important. Norman Siegel being a civil rights attorney, my life as a person who actually had to carry out this job of policing, Gail Brewer and her years in government with extreme and important progressive agendas and ideas. We came together as a body, bringing all of our life experience to listen to the public and come out with a document with real solutions. And I just really want to emphasize, this is not an I hate the police endeavor. And one important aspect that we did that I'm truly proud of by using innovation, we put in place what we call digital dialogues. We brought young people throughout the borough from different neighborhoods who don't know each other. And we use Google Hangout to have them sit in their classes and their schools and speak to each other across the borough to hear their ideas. We were amazed at how much they had similar views on policing. We were amazed to see some communities which you would have thought would have been anti-police were very much embracing the police department. The young people had the opportunity to speak to each other and come up with ideas. One of the untold stories about the issue of policing is the fact that many people have different views on who the police is and what are their responsibilities. And we must be all part of that conversation and dialogue. And I believe through the digital dialogue and the dialogue in our town hall meetings, we allow New Yorkers to have the opportunities to be a part of this. We want to expand. This is not the ending. This is the beginning. We want to encourage the other 3 other borough presidents to duplicate what we were doing. We took a sampling of the population. We believe that sampling is a reflection of what people are feeling inside the city of New York. They want their police, but they want their police to protect them and respect them and ensure that no matter what your economic status is, you deserve the dignity and respect of being a New Yorker. Ethnicity should not drive policy. Crime should drive policies. And that's what we hope this report helps us do. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both Norman and to Eric. So thanks to Norman Seago's instigation, my colleague Eric Adams' participation, and the brilliance of Deputy Borough President Aldrin Bonilla, who's not able to be here. He's at pension training, God help him. My office held 3 police community dialogues. And these roundtable events brought together many of you in the room, community activists, NYCHA residents and leaders, many, many young people, and rank and file commanding officer from New York Police Department, and there were a lot, almost 30 or 40 police officers at each one of these roundtables. We had real conversations based on the participants' personal experiences. Officers and residents alike expressed both their discomfort in dealing with each other, but along with what Eric Adams said, also their mutual feelings of wanting to get along, wanting mutual respect. They wanted each other to be part of each other's lives. Sometimes this was as simple as saying hello to each other, exactly what the borough president stated. Sometimes it was more complicated, learning to understand each other's perspectives and struggles. You might not know, but I am a data person. And so for me, our forums represented well over 800 human data points of observation. These data points gave us a first-hand look at what matters to communities in regard to safety and policing. We know we have CompStat, but we also know that we have more to measure than crime statistics. We know we need increased transparency, increased accountability, and a lot more respect on both sides of the aisle. We heard from people who know their beat officers well, and were even surprised to be seated with them at a table, because we had round tables in rooms like this. And we heard from people, especially young people, who had no idea who was patrolling their neighborhood. We heard from officers who knew their communities well, and from those who were not yet aware of the details of the new NYPD policies and practices, again, what you heard from Norman. From all of our human data points, we identified some key areas where we think change can happen. As I said, accountability, transparency, training, and eligibility. I agree with whatever Eric said. We need evaluations based on officer performance and behavior. We need increased departmental transparency. We need training that better prepares officers to de-escalate situations, and eligibility that expands the current pool of potential police applicants. Again, what you heard earlier. The refrain we heard over and over was the need to foster and promote non-confrontational interactions, particularly between NYPD and young people. Young people at my table, and at one forum, it was a beautiful day. It was an overflow of hundreds in the meeting room. So I took everybody who was left over, including me, to the playground where there was a picnic table, and we met there. That was my round table. And they said, young people at my table, that they wanted police officers to interact with them in their schools and sports or other activities to break barriers, particularly in plainclothes. NYP does such forums. I've been at them, but not enough. And so during the next months or so, my office will be releasing grants to organizations in which young people design positive programming to improve these relationships. We will continue to work with our colleagues in other boroughs, as was said earlier, with the NYPD and with all of the communities in pursuing these changes. We found that some tasks can begin immediately. Some of our human data points suggested that a simple hello, this was said over and over and over again, a simple hello can go a long way. I have a recent story that illustrates this point. We had some extra tickets to the Pope, I will tell you, and so we gave some to staff and we gave some to people from the neighborhood. And a friend of mine went, somebody I've known for a long time. She happens to be a Haitian American woman, and she took her friend from first grade. And it was a very special experience. So first of all, one thing they saw, everybody got excited because they had to wait in line 2.5 hours to get in. And they saw a rainbow. That got everybody excited. That was one thing. But this was more important. She said the police officers were amazing. Now understand there's 80,000 people. There were a number of people across the street from the lines hoping to get in. They were really hoping to get in. The officer asked those in line if they had extra tickets. And there were extra tickets in line. There was a positive response about tickets. And there, across the street, the officer would go to the people who had the tickets, bring a ticket to the persons across the line who didn't have one. And each time a ticket was delivered, everybody in line cheered. It was a very special experience, and it was all done by NYPD. So it's a beautiful example of camaraderie and community in my experience. So what's new here? What we're saying is measure what matters to the community by simply asking the community. This is a great way to help bridge reality and perception and the very real divide of distrust, which does exist. So thank you very much to Norman Siegel, to Borough President Eric Adams, to Cal Snyder, who was indicated earlier, wrote much of the report. In my office, Alvin Bonilla, Aisha Irfan, Lucille Songhai, Jessica Mates in particular, and I certainly want to thank Stefan and Ryan from the Brooklyn Borough President's Office. And to the many of you who are here today, the community board members, the community leaders, the youth and their leaders, and others who joined us at the forums and are joining us here today. It's a report that's not going to sit on the shelf. It's a report that we're going to implement. Thank you very much. So, questions? Yes.
Just identify yourself, your social security number, et cetera.
Richard Lamb.
Rich Lamb, WCBS News Radio. I just wanted to ask Eric, and when you were a police officer, could you have used a sabbatical? And would you have used it? Was there a time when you felt like you were overwhelmed or just didn't?
That's a good question. Yes, I think in probably it had to be in my 11th or 12th year. It was, it could have been even later. It was around the time when I was studying to become a lieutenant, and someone shot at my car and shut out the windows of my car. And I was overwhelmed. You know, I was worried about, my son and how it impacted him. And I needed time to be with him so that he could understand that, Dad was going to be all right. And so each time there's an assassination, such as with Lou and Officer Ramos, the trauma that goes through your family is unbelievable. And if you are in a high crime area where you hear over the radio negative reports of the numerical minority that are committing crimes that is of one ethnicity, you tend to police based on the minority and not the majority. And so you need time to refresh yourself. And I think this is so important because what is missing from policing across the country is having officers become mindful again. We should infuse things like meditation. We should show officers how to de-escalate stress. We should show them what stress does to the body and how it gets in the way of you actually being able to report to a high stressful crime. We should teach them how to be present in the moment, not to take with you when you report to the job that you responded to what happened a few weeks ago because someone did something negative to you in that same community. If we don't take a more mindful approach to policing, we're not going to understand that policing is not just about chasing bad guys. It's how do we deal with the pain that good people are going through. And so I did reach that point I felt drained. And I saw it in my son and what he went through. And it came a point that said, do I still want to do this career? And so many officers have that drain, no outlet to go to. And instead of having that outlet to go to replenish themselves, they have an outlet to go to be aggressive to a public who they blame for what they are feeling.
Yes, in the back, yes, in the back.
Manager, New York One. So Norman, all of you can answer this question. You mentioned that this year is predicted that there'll be 45,000 cases of stop and frisk, and that's a low number. Now your question is, if that's lawful, I'm quite sure some people are going to say, you guys run it both ways. When they were stopping a lot of people, you complain now that they're stopping a low amount of people. You're also questioning that.
Well, no, we don't want it both ways. We want it to be consistent with the law. And the Supreme Court in 1969 in Terry versus Ohio set forth a standard for stops and a standard for frisks. They're different. They talked about the dehumanization of the frisk and the humiliation that someone has to go through. You talk to young Black and Latino males in communities throughout the city, they'll explain to you what that is on a personal level. What we want the NYP to do, and if you look at the appendix with the letters, A, we don't want them illegally training cops with regard to what the standard is for stop and frisk. And the numbers were way too high, and the court confirmed that. We're questioning now whether or not, when people talk about let's get rid of stop and frisk, none of us, including myself, ever articulated that. What we want is stop and frisk, which is a good, lawful tool for law enforcement, to be done consistent with the law. And whatever the numbers are, they'll speak for themselves. We're not wanting a low number or a high number. If we're assured that the police are following the law, that's all we want. And Commissioner Bratton, when he came from LA for Bratton 2, said, we are not going to break the law to enforce the law. We agree, Bill Bratton, with that. And the challenge for Bill Bratton, do you live by those words as long as you're the police commissioner of New York City? And we hope he does, and hope he will. And if he doesn't, we'll be very critical.
All right, yes, right here.
Juliet Papa, Cincinnati. This is for Eric Adams.
We all know your voice.
How do you reconcile the fact that this report is calling for decriminalization of some of these quality of life issues, but how do you reconcile that with the perception that there are quality of life problems because if there's public urination, if people riding by some street, if these kind of things, there's a level of lawlessness there.
And so true. And because when we look at policing, we must look at it holistically. You don't want to kick the can down the road. This is what we were doing. We had a group of summarizable offenses, which were quality of life offenses. And if the person received a summons for that, and we want to continue to give them a summons for that, if they received a summons and paid their summons, then there was nothing on their record. If they received the summons, as many children will do, and place it in their back pocket or don't tell their parents, then they receive a warrant for that summons, and they can be arrested, go through the criminal justice system, and have a permanent record. When I became a police officer, I had 4 summonses. I didn't know you're supposed to pay the fare. I jumped the turnstile so much. You know, I had 4 summonses.
Statute of limitations is run on that.
But those 4 summonses, because I didn't have the money to pay for it, and when you did an overview, a mapping of where those summonses were coming from, they were coming from impoverished parts of the city. So a lot of these young people, we had hundreds of thousands of individuals who had criminal court warrants. So what we're saying, keep the summons in place when someone does a quality of life offense, but don't attach a warrant. If they don't pay it, you could prevent people from being able to renew their license until they get it paid. You can do other creative things to ensure that the person pays the summons. You can garnish your salary. There's so much you can do, but we should not create an environment where we have hundreds of thousands of young people, particularly of color, who have warrants. So they would never be the employee at American Express. They can't be teachers. They can't be police officers. We are kicking the can down the road and creating a criminal body based on mischievous juvenile behavior. That is what we're saying. We're not saying take away from issuing summonses. We're saying it can't be continue to be a criminal offense where someone is going to jail, someone is stopping at your home at 6 in the morning, putting handcuffs on you, taking you down to court, and putting you through the system for 3 days because you rode a bike on the sidewalk and didn't pay the summons.
So do you think this is being articulated enough? Because I think what we hear is decriminalize, and we hear the police commissioner say no way. But this is the first time I'm hearing that somebody's suggesting some other options.
Because you know why? People hear what they want to hear. You know that? And what's needed by policymakers is for just take a moment and not bring all the baggage we take with us into policing and say, let me be present and listen to what you're saying. Let me hear before I speak. And that is what is happening in policing circles. Policing is a unique place. This macho attitude of we got it right, don't tell us what to do, is what's really hurting us from moving forward. So we're hoping Commissioner Bratton brings a fresh, new energy of saying, let me listen to what you're saying and not use these sound bites of decriminalizing. No, I don't want to live in the community. I said from the onset, I am a believer in broken window policing. I don't want to come home and hear music loud at night. I don't want to see you urinating on the corner. I don't want you smoking marijuana in my lobby. I don't want you doing any of those things that will erode the quality of life. But I also don't want to turn juvenile mischief into criminality. We're better than that as a city and better than that as a country.
I just want to add, some of the district attorneys, I think in Brooklyn and maybe Manhattan, are also having these forums.
Yes.
Which really are hugely well attended and are getting at that point that Eric Adams just made, which is that we're here to help you come with your summons and we will work with you. Those forums need to continue as part of our ongoing work. Any other questions? Oh, just press. It's just press. Yes, press. Anybody else in the press? Yes. Oz, you have to introduce yourself. I know who you are.
How likely is it that you think the mayor and the police commissioner will sign on to the call to change the type of penalties for quality of life offenses? Since Bratton has said before, removing the criminal penalty removes an important tool from policing, which they can use with various degrees of discretion.
I mean, I can add, others will do the same, which is that there has been a positive reaction from NYPD, and I certainly think the way that it was just explained by the Brooklyn Borough President, and also I've been to some of these forums when the warrants are discussed and where people have an explanation that's given to them individually, and given the huge turnout that I've seen at these forums, I think it's very, very clear that they work. We hear mostly about the gun buybacks. We haven't heard as much about these warrant forums. And they're incredibly successful. People get services from some of the legal aid and attorneys. And I think this is an example of, we hear, where it would make a lot of sense to follow up on what our report suggests. I think it'll be a positive response from City Hall. Others may want to comment.
I'm cautiously optimistic based on some conversations I've had with the NYPD prior to the release of this report. The most important thing, and one of the themes from our town hall meetings, is that regardless of whether you make the change, what's the process? Can the community be involved in the process? I think when Juliet asked that question, and when she says it's the first time she heard what Eric was explaining, we've been saying this for a while now, and if her reaction is a true reaction, then we need to double our effort in explaining what we mean when we're opposed to certain aspects of broken windows. I do and am a big believer on searching for common ground. It's not easy sometimes, but I think that the time is ripe right now. The moment is here for the two bills, Bratton and de Blasio, to sit down with us and at least to begin the conversation. If they do that, kudos to them. If they don't do that, it's a blown opportunity, both politically and legally, because we don't need the kind of confrontations that we occur, that sometimes I bring by going to the court. If we could sit down and begin to express to the two bills what we heard over the last 7 months by residents in the city, my sense from knowing a little about both of them, they should be open. It's to their advantage, and most important, it's to the advantage of the city of New York and the people in New York to have this kind of dialogue.
That's just one, 'cause that's an important question that you raised about. I think many of the points in the report, police chiefs enjoy the power of policing. Remember, our police department is over 30,000 officers. There's probably no more powerful commissioner than the commissioner of the New York City Police Department, because public safety is important to us. And police chiefs and heads of police agencies, they want to hold that power. We did not elect Bratton. We elected Mayor de Blasio. This is his legacy. And I think that there's some pieces in this report that he's going to have a closed-door meeting with his commissioner and say, I'm not going to get in the way of you carrying out your role of public protection, but you are not going to get in the way of my legacy. He can't leave his mayoralty not addressing this problem of policing. And police agencies, chiefs, and commissioners have a tight fist. They are not going to be able to shake their hand with the community residents with that fist being tight. It's time to open up. And it's up to the mayor to set the tone. He's the leader of the city of New York, and it's his responsibility.
And let me add one thing. Oh, Gail,
No,
go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, we'll take more questions after Norman speaks, but it's just from the press, so you understand.
One thing, and it always gets me in trouble, but I've never been at a press conference where I didn't get in trouble. When we began this process, we reached out to the mayor's office, and they did send a representative to our first press conference announcing the process, and the person would not participate in the press conference. No one from the mayor's office, as far as we know, attended any of the 7 town hall meetings. And until yesterday, when we got a call saying they wanted a copy of the report. When I read the report again for the 7th time last night, I realized that the mayor is only mentioned once in the report. It's in the timeline when the police officers turned their backs on him. And it occurred to me, and I'm going to say it, that to some extent, in following up on Eric's point, what does that say? We didn't consciously write this report to exclude him. But the fact that he wasn't prominent in the report, Bratton is all over the report. That's the challenge for Bill de Blasio now. The person that some of us, and I'll admit, voted for him twice, not in the same election, but in the primary and the election, and are extremely disappointed on, quote, his self-proclaimed progressivism. What we are putting in this report, whether you call it progressivism or not, it is something that needs to be done. And he has an opportunity now to sit down with us and people in the community. The idea of not participating in town hall meetings that he and his staff were invited to, what does that say? Did they not want to listen to the people in this room and other people who are coming forward to express their pain and anger at the police department, and then to find out that even though there's the anger and the pain, they want to work with the police? For me, that was like, you talk about rainbows, that was a rainbow in the sense that we have common ground here. So the challenge for Bill de Blasio, not only for his legacy, but also for his stewardship of being the mayor for all the people of the city of New York, is to read this report and sit down with us and maybe have some town hall meetings himself to find out what people in the city want. And what you will find, Bill de Blasio, there's common ground here. We can put the bridge together, build the bridge between the police and the community a lot better than any mayor has done up to this point. The moment is now. Let's do it.
Thank you. I just want to say Mayor Dinkins did come to one of our forums and
Yes.
stayed the whole time. Just want to let you know. The press? Yes, go ahead.
Chester Soria from Metro. There's a lot of the recommendations about what police can do. I'm curious if you can elaborate a little bit, because it touches on the report, what onus the community has to improve the relations to.
Okay. I mean, I can say from the town halls that we participated in and ran, the community wants to be the one that says hello. The community wants to sponsor forums in which police department personnel participate. They want to, but they have to have somebody who says, yes, we will participate with you. The community boards are often the place where a lot of dialogue takes place. They want to be the group that brings the different parties together. It's what Eric said is that it's almost like the community is stating, and they said this from young people to older people. The community said over and over again, we want common ground. We want to work with the police department. There wasn't almost any, I don't like the police department. It was, we have a communication problem. We want to be able to work with you. You heard this from people who are very angry and people who are leaders in the community who've been doing this for a long time. So the answer to your question is the community wants to welcome the police department, but they need that hello. They need somebody to say, we want to do it with you. And they have to do it on a sustainable basis. It can't be just one basketball game on a Friday night. It has to be on a sustained basis.
What about working within the community? I know the report recommends, stuff on like anti-snitching culture and stuff like that. Like, what can the community itself do to sort of
You want to
improve
add?
that?
Go ahead.
Well, let me just add, my vision is that this report, over the next 6 months, at every community not-for-profit group, at every religious group, business group, tenant groups, that they devote one of their meetings to discussion of this report. Someone from the 3 entities that are the principal authors of this will send somebody there so that we can have a further discussion. And we want them to pass, including the community boards, resolutions supporting the contents and the recommendations, or most of them, in this report, so that we build a grassroots movement in this city over the next 6 months that makes sure that this report doesn't wind up on a shelf or in the garbage pail. We want this report to become a living document. And so when you read at the end, and has been articulated, this is not the end of this process. Hopefully it's the beginning. If the city of New York and the residents want to bring about the change with regard to policing in New York City, we want them to talk about this, to pass resolutions, and then the city council and the political people are going to then adopt these resolutions. So Asi's question before, how they can do it, it's all interconnected. If people don't do what we're talking about now, this won't go anywhere. New Yorkers, if you want the changes we're talking about, you want a better policing in the city of New York to protect and serve the city, read this report, begin to join our coalition so that we can get the changes finally. Rodney King, we saw that 25 years ago or whatever, and everybody said, wow, we've got to do something. And really nothing was done. If we want to create these changes, we need the political will, and the only way I know to get the political will to make it happen is from the bottom up. These folks here today took time out. They care enough to be here, and they need to be the vanguard of the rest of the people in the city, black, brown, red, yellow, and white together. As Dr. King always told us, we shall overcome. 50 years ago, some of us went south to bring about the change. We in New York now, 50 years later, if we want this change, because so much of this is about race, there's no doubt about it. The people that were targeted in the last year were black men. Let's not hide that. And that is something that America and New York has to deal with. It has enormous racial overtones, and reading this report becomes the blueprint and gives advocates out in the street all the kind of historical data with endnotes and footnotes and bibliography. Here is your arguments. Let's make this happen once and for all.
I think it's important just to answer your question specifically, and we really want to embrace the term holistic. We want to encourage schools to have children come up with creative ideas of how do we bridge the gap. We want our sociologists and psychiatrists to talk about mapping out what are ways to really take away some of the pain that people feel, and how do we move forward in improving relationships. And so if we have a holistic approach, we want our churches to have law enforcement days when police officers can come in and interact with the parishioners. We don't want to leave any stone unturned of finding ways of taking that wall that has been built for so many years, and it's a holistic approach. It's not a one-dimensional. Many people have stated during the hearings, I don't know how. And so we have professionals who really understand how to bring people together, how to do conflict resolutions, how to redevelop relationships. basically, we have been living in a marriage that we don't know each other, and now we need a marriage counselor to help us come together as a family. That's what this is about, bringing that marriage together of police and community instead of living in the same household, our community, and not communicating with each other. And there are professionals out there that know how to do it. So this is a call to them. This is a call for all of the major people that do team buildings and corporations, that do team buildings and conflict resolution. Let's all get engaged in this process. You know, this report is only the beginning point, and we all should be engaged in the process of making it happen.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think the undertone that has been touched upon is like there's an arrogance that comes from the police, and that's the biggest problem, which is actually a nationwide problem because it's a, you know, we're the best country in the world, spreads in other politics, but locally. So to solve that, I would say, would you agree that maybe they should hire less policemen, but pay them very well and get very, very smart people, and that would cut. Like, because it's hard to be in the streets every day. We're in the streets with our cameras, and it's hard. So you don't get paid enough. You go home, and then you just dislike everything and everybody, like all of us do at times during the day. So that could be a solution. Like, have less of them, but pay them very well and scrutiny them. And the other thing is that what happens all over the world is that they, well, in many countries, policemen have no guns, but here they do, which is because of the situation. But they are trained to stop, not to kill in other countries. Here, they're stop and kill. And that is the ultimate arrogance, because when you are suspicious of something and you shoot the person, like it happened with the Ramarley Graham right in the Bronx. They shot him in front of his grandmother and his little 6-year-old brother because of a suspicion. They're acting like the judge, the policeman, the jury, the lawyers, and God all at the same time. That is the ultimate thing. So what aren't they trying to stop? Because in other countries, if they're really suspicious, they shoot your leg, your knee, your foot.
I'm going to just answer one aspect of it that I feel strongly about, which is the age issue. Because, you know, it's 35 now, and we actually think it could be 45 in terms of somebody who's got more maturity. And then there was a discussion also about the sabbatical and also discussion of people who have on-the-job training. There might also be discussion of maybe more money and maybe a 4-year college degree for people who are coming out of their parents' home, as was described earlier. So I think there are ways that maybe not decreasing the number, but training at the academy was discussed, also more training, different age group, and certainly maybe more academic in a profession that you are going to go into. So there were ways in which we're trying to address your topic, which is more professional, but maybe Eric Adams or others would like to talk.
Yeah, so you can't, please just to answer that question. It's also interesting that I saw a lot of passion coming from you, you know, so you understand that some of the challenges in policing. You shoot at the large body mass, you know, you shoot to stop. And you don't shoot to kill. Police are not trained to shoot to kill. They're trained to shoot at large body mass. So, yeah, but if you shoot at an arm and leg, it will miss the target a large number of times and hit an innocent person. So you're trained to shoot at a large body mass, so you don't, if you try to shoot a gun out of someone's hand, if you try to shoot someone's leg or knee, you're less likely to hit the target. So you want to shoot to stop. This is based on police training. But let me tell you this, we don't need academically smart police officers. We need emotionally intelligent police officers. And part of the training should be EI. We should train people how to be emotionally intelligent. And we don't do it in public school. We don't do it in the police academy. We want an emotionally intelligent police officer. Being able to have a PhD is not going to make you emotionally intelligent. It's going to make you academically smart. We need a police officer that knows how to respond in the heat of the moment in an emotionally intelligent way in any interaction that he has.
I just wanted to add, for the record, when you said to get police officers that are smarter. For the record, I don't think our police officers are dumb. I think they are smart, but I think what we need is better training and de-escalation, and also what Eric just said. But to let that comment go by without commenting on it would be a disservice to the police of the city of New York. They are smart.
Other comments from the press?
Yeah.
Yes.
On the issue of the body cameras, there's some limitation or costs related to FOIL requests for that information? Do you know if anybody is addressing that legislatively or regulatorily?
Well, people are starting. There's a couple of instances. I talked about the New York One situation. There was also a individual in Florida who asked for copies, and they sent him a bill for $30,000 or something, and he worked out a deal. People are just beginning to understand, from my perspective, that the use of body cameras is not the panacea, and that we have to address certain issues with regard, most important, who has access to it, how long they're going to keep it, and those issues. The criticism in New York is not only did we have a pilot, but we're now expanding the program, and we haven't addressed those issues. If the police departments don't address it, including NYPD, it will be up to the city council and the state legislature to then pass those laws. So the message to Bratton and de Blasio, if you don't address them, you're going to lose control over how this is going to evolve and who has access. My position is the public must have access to these documents, and to have body cameras that we can't see is unacceptable.
Any other questions from the press? If not, I want to thank each and every one of you from joining here. I want to thank Borough President Eric Adams, Civil Rights Attorney Norman Siegel, and everyone who helped make this possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
It was great. It was great. Yes.
How are you? Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
I'm taking this back to USAT.
Okay, good.
We needed the contact.
Please, let me know.
Definitely want to. I have a cornerstone.
Yes, I do know that. I remember that. We talked last time. Living in the community. Okay. Yeah. I know. It's a big difference. It's a big difference. Let us know how we can help. Good. Thank you very much.
So we'll be in contact.
Thank you. Keep in touch. Thanks for coming here today.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
How are you? Nice to see you.
While they're setting up, how many?